I do think that one thing is already clear is that the education is becoming the new gym membership. I think if you're going to stay current, if you're going to stay up to date, if you're going to improve your productivity anywhere close to the rate of AI, it's going to be a 1 to 2 hour a week commitment to just spend time in structured learning. And I think that's kind of this beautiful, to end on a high note, optimistic view of the future is like we stop seeing learning and college and higher education as this like once in a lifetime thing, and it becomes like, yeah, it's going to be very intense for a few years after high school, but then it's always going to be with you, and you're always going to have that
Absolutely.
joy of learning.
Right.
And I think that's like AI is actually going to accelerate that future. So that's what I'm building towards. And if you're curious, go to
Yeah.
campus.edu.
No, okay, Kyle, it's hip replacement number 60.
Big 60.
Right.
That's a big number. That's a huge number.
It is a big number. It is a big number. We've become sesquicentenarians, or I don't know. No, that's not right.
Sesquicentenarian? I don't know. We'll go with something in between the two of those.
There's some long word that the kid who won the Scripps spelling bee last week in the
That was last week. I totally missed that.
Yeah,
Damn.
and it came down to some sort of like sudden the spelling bee equivalent of a sudden death finale. Sudden death overtime thing where, each kid has to spell as many words as possible in 90 seconds. True pressure cooker. Type environment.
That stresses me out.
It's funny though because it's sort of the spelling bee and the gigantic amount of of preparation you would imagine has to go into that dovetails a little bit into our conversation with our guest today. Kyle, why don't you introduce that?
Yeah. So we are joined by Tade Oyerinde, who is the founder of Campus, which is a really cool college education concept, we'll call it. It's a debt-free online college startup that basically is in response to how much debt goes into college. And there's larger discussions happening now, and I've written about this too, about like college changing. Is college worth it? What's happening now? I think that's something definitely on the mind of many people. I think it started with millennials and now is going strong through Gen Z, Gen A, and there's various things in between. So welcome, Tade. Super excited to have you and super excited to chat about what you do and about what's been happening in the world.
Of course. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
So Tade, it looks by the look of things, for those who are not watching this podcast because you have normal lives and you listen to it in cars or while you're working out or whatever, like a normal person, Tade looks like he is about a mile south of me in Williamsburg. We can see the Williamsburg Bridge behind
I am.
him.
That's right.
Excellent.
Oh wow!
Well,
beautiful.
I was going to say glad we've got a local pod happening because typically Kyle it finds us guests from the furthest flung corners of the world, and so
I can get on a plane if that would help.
Hey. Wouldn't be the first time we've had a guest in
that's
transit.
a typical thing, right?
Yeah,
we offer to fly people out for hip replacement, and then it turns out they're just a mile down the road. Well, Tade, welcome. How does this beautiful day in New York find you?
Look, I mean, it finds me drinking my second caffeinated stimulant beverage of the morning, and just trying to really wrap my head around all the things that are happening. Like I think in my world, I thought I was just going to build a 2-year college to help young people learn useful things without going into debt, and then a guy called Sam Altman decided, nope, let's make everything much more interesting and change fundamentally
right.
all of the skills that people need to be useful. And so,
right.
I'm often at home in the morning. I usually go in around this time, but I'm just trying to really take a step back and figure out what the hell are we supposed to do as a higher education institution.
Okay, so let's talk about Sam Altman for a second, because on the one hand, you could read that comment to mean just the way that OpenAI or the proliferation of large language models, generally speaking, has changed the implications of what higher education is now, will be, should be, so on and so forth. On the other hand, you actually work with him in some way, shape, or form right through Campus, and so he's literally changing things for you specifically. Is that
Right.
the right way to
Yeah,
understand that?
he was our first major investor alongside with Jason Citron, the founder of Discord. Once we decided not just to sell software for online learning, but to actually become an institution,
Right.
an accredited college, he was the first guy who really kind of got crazy about it and decided to give us the capital to actually make this happen. So Sam, I mean, he told me this is 2021. He said, I'm doing this investment because I think that there's going to need to be a massive rethinking of how we teach and what we
Sure.
teach
Yeah.
young people coming out of high school. And I don't think our community colleges are going to be quick enough to adapt.
Right.
By the way, this is pre-ChatGPT, so I'm just going, yeah, all right, okay, sure.
Yeah.
But sort of learn never bet against Sam for sure. But yeah, I think in general, it's interesting. Like sort of, we had phase one, and I think a lot of people were just getting ready to settle into the phase one of the AI transition, which is just large language models. It's a text box, you type it, and it's shockingly smart at what it responds to you. But I think now with agents and this whole agentic workflow, in integration, it's a completely different level in terms of automation of whole jobs, automation of whole categories of jobs that people used to do and are no longer going to need to do. And then, okay, well, what are they going to do? There's still lots of things that the AI can't do. So let's help train people to be equipped to go and do those things. So it's a huge shake and bake moment, as my dad would call it, for society. And yeah, we need to be adaptive.
Yeah. Well, so as listeners to the pod know, I have a 19-year-old who has just finished his sophomore year in college, and who I would describe broadly as anti-AI, or at the very least, highly skeptical. And that seems to be a feeling that his cohort shares generally. And part of this
You
is
saw the commencement speeches getting booed.
yeah, exactly. And this is one of the stories that we're going to talk about. But and then I have a junior in high school, about to finish her junior year in high school, who is looking at colleges now. And what I wonder about the sort of tack you're taking generally is, who is college, or who is campus for, and who's it for, who's it not for, and then what do you currently think that you're conveying to the people that it is for, about this moment of flux, right? Because we could have had this conversation 2 weeks ago and it might have been different. This might have been a different answer 2 weeks ago.
That's a great point. Everything's changing so quickly. Yeah. Nobody said it was, like sort of running a high growth institution. It's super fun, but nobody said it was going to be this exhausting, and boy, is it exhausting. Look, I think so. I started campus for myself. I was homeschooled until high school. So I'm a very sort of inherently self-startery person. I'm not a genius or anything. My older sister's a genius. My parents decided, okay, she'd be slowed down by public school or private school, so we're going to homeschool the kids, my twin brother and my sister and me. But that did sort of frame me to be very sort of self-starter. I like to push myself. I like to just follow my curiosities. And then I sort of went to study aerospace engineering in university, but dropped out my third year to start a business. And so in general, I don't like waiting. I'm kind of impatient, and I want to learn useful, practical things and apply them as quickly as possible. So campus is kind of for students like that, and then who don't want debt. Obviously, with student loan debt about to pass $2 trillion in America, a lot of people are just like, what's the value of this? What's the point of this? I'm learning theory. So if you're the kind of kid who has a big business idea or wants to travel and live in Barcelona for 4 months out of the year while in school, and then go live in Thailand or something while you're still doing your college classes, or just anyone who's just kind of creative about the approach you're taking to figuring out what you're supposed to do with your life energy, campus is for you. And so that's kind of the default sort of category of profiles that tend to like campus. And then the cool thing about campus is, unlike just a gap year, or unlike not going to college and just being a beach bum and getting tattoos and seeing where life takes you, right, without getting educated at the same time, you're at campus, you're getting a degree, you're learning useful things that you can apply to earn today. And then you have the optionality of transferring after 2 years with us, getting your associate's degree, you can transfer into NYU. We have students who've gone to UPenn, the UC, like UCLA, etc. It's still a college experience. So it's basically college, but uncollege.
Yeah. I mean, I someone who did transfer, and I went from a like full scholarship to a partial scholarship. Like I definitely, during the transfer, that is, I definitely understand how helpful that is. And like it is an experience that it sounds like it can really help meet people halfway and meet this moment where it's like you can be a bit more adaptive. I would assume it's adaptive in the way that, because to your point of you can sort of do it anywhere, I would assume that the curriculum and sort of like the things you can learn are similarly as adaptive too. Or there might be constraints because of being accredited. I don't know.
No, we try to make it super adaptive, and the key to that is it's live online. So
Right.
if you think about Coursera or all of these courses where you're watching pre-recorded videos, guess what? All that curriculum gets stale, and nobody has the time or the money to go and re-record all of the things, and so the curriculum gets stale. Campus is different. It's all live online classes. So just as we're meeting face to face, that's how all of our classes are, with 150 students, one professor, and 5 TAs. But what's really interesting is all the professors who teach campus classes are part-time professors with us that are also teaching at top 50 universities: Princeton, UCLA, Morehouse, University of Michigan. So for them, it's a way for the professors to make extra cash and then teach our students. So it's a really dynamic experience.
That's what I was wondering about. Was it what the incentive for those professors to get involved here is? I mean, and not, of course, I'm sure money is nice and a fundamental thing, but would you say any of them are there because it's a hedge against the the potential dilution of what the college experience is in the future, and they're sort of future proofing their own paths? Or is it because they're invested philosophically in the mission? Or is it because they just love teaching and so they can't not teach all the time?
It's a mixed bag. I mean, I think the biggest category of motivation is that unfortunately a majority of professors in the US today are adjuncts. So you have tenured professors, they can do whatever, say whatever, they can't be fired, they're tenured. You have tenure track professors, which is like if you get really good teaching evaluations and do good research for 25 years, you'll probably get tenure. Then you have adjuncts. They're basically the Uber drivers of higher education. They're on a 3 or 6 month contract typically, and they make about $60,000 a year. They're not actually living the really secure. There's no job security, and they're typically the big workforce that's teaching all the first and second year courses at most universities. And so
including the elite ones that you named.
Absolutely. NYU, 50% of faculty are adjuncts. UCLA, it's more than 50% of faculty teaching year 1, year 2 classes are adjuncts. So this is like the top schools all across the country. Even Columbia, it's about 50% of the first. Again, if you're a freshman or sophomore, you're going to be learning from an adjunct. Right. And so our whole thing was, how can we help adjuncts supplement their existing income? They still keep their job teaching at Columbia. They love it. They have an office. They get to hang out with their peers. It's a good, intellectually stimulating environment. But they can also make real extra cash. We pay about double the average national wage for teaching our students than they're going to be getting on campus. And so, I mean, we have professors making 90 grand a year teaching with us part-time, while they're making 50 grand a year teaching at their elite institution full-time, part-time as well as an adjunct. So that's kind of the high-level model. Of course, there are some professors who just love the idea of teaching these sort of wandering, Burning Man, future Burning Man type kids and entrepreneurs and all types of, people. So I think it's also a really rewarding experience for faculty.
It's funny you should say that, because I was listening this morning to an interview with Theo Baker, the student journalist at Stanford who broke the story that ended up causing Stanford's provost, or whatever that title is, to step down. And he was talking about this course that's apparently called How to Rule the World, and is a course for 12 students taught by a Silicon Valley CEO where everybody who gets into the course has to be handpicked and recommended by a previous student of the course, and so on. And so it's, on the one hand, it sounds like this very sort of like future Illuminati shit. On the other hand, the point that Theo Baker made, which is, I thought, very wise, was he's like, look, this is a CEO who wants to hang out with people he thinks are going to be future high potential people. It's a networking opportunity essentially for the professor. And I thought that was a very canny read of the situation. I would imagine some of your adjuncts or your students are looking at it going like, how do I get in with the like minds of the world, for better or for worse? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, look, high level, nobody does anything interesting ever without a community of people who are like-minded. Look, it's one of the things I tell people all the time. Everything's a scene. If you want to be a comedian, you need to be doing comedy at, the grungy $10 entry ticket, stand-up spots all over,
Right.
Lower Manhattan and in LA. And if you're not a part of that scene, you're not going to become the next Dave Chappelle. If you're not playing AAU basketball, you're not going to, or at least doing, the equivalent in Europe, you're not going to become the next, big athlete. And similarly, if you're trying to do business, you're trying to do entrepreneurship, and you're not hanging out with the Teal Fellows, and you're not hanging out with the Y Combinator founders, and you're not, in a disgusting hacker home with, 4 guys on a bunk bed, like I lived for 4 years. Well, you're just probably not, or going to Stanford, or going to Harvard, or going to UPenn. You're probably not going to be exposed to the people who are going to build the future of Silicon Valley. And so, figuring out what you want to do, and then how to, expose yourself to at least some exposure, some level of exposure of the scene that's going to help you get there and be a part of that community is extremely important. So that's what we tell our students. It's, you got to know the stuff, you got to have the knowledge, you got to have the skills, but then you also got to have the network and the community. And so, we try to provide that for students.
I think I would describe this pod as pro-scenius for sure. Scenius being the portmanteau of scene and genius that is used to describe these. I mean, it's a real term, right? It's not. I didn't make that up. But the
Really?
thing though that can. Oh no, for sure. Yeah, it's like the classic example of scenius is CBGBs in the early or mid 1970s, where you had Blondie and Talking Heads and the Ramones and television and Johnny Thunders all in the same room.
That's cool.
Forced together by the literal topography of the room to intermix and to exchange ideas and so on and so forth. Anyway, we're I would say pro-scenius on the pod for sure. The thing that concerns me a little bit about what you just said is that, yes, it is true that if you want to be a part of that Silicon Valley thing, you need to be in those situations. But I worry that we venerate the Silicon Valley of it a little more than we ought. And I wonder to what extent to whatever extent you try to meter against that, or if you think that's a naive concern from my side, because tech ultimately will.
Or are there any counterbalances? Like, it seems like there definitely is that focus on those people who are going to be, say, these Silicon Valley startup type people. But like, is there a thriving like English literature division within? Like, is there like a group of like science people? Like, what do the people who do go on to other colleges, what do they do? Like, are they all focus on that same track, or are they sort of going into varied spaces?
Look, I have a very robust, probably a bit aggressive critique of Silicon Valley. I don't think it's this particular critique. I don't think it's this particular critique, but look, I think How to Rule the World. It reminds me of Masters of the Universe. Remember, every asshole after watching Wall Street in the 80s or 90s was like, "Oh, I'm a master of the universe."
I actually do remember that. That's how old I am. I actually do remember that. Yes.
Well, when you were homeschooled in the 90s, you spent all day on the internet and reading about this stuff. So even though I was 8, I remember that. But like my mental model is not, it's not to critique the sort of the highly concentrated nature of the power. I think there's always been, these high concentrations of influence, whether it's in Hollywood and the golden era, or Wall Street in the 80s, 90s, or DC kind of perennially, or Silicon Valley today. It's more that the people leading many of the important institutions in Silicon Valley are sort of just like unpatriotic, agnostic slash atheist, like assholes who are autistic and don't give a crap about the country. Like that's to me the real thing. And I bring in religion because if you look at, read the memoirs of the big robber barons during the Industrial Revolution, they all knew deeply in their heart that they were going to go and meet their maker after this, 90 years on this planet. And if they didn't do enough good, they were not gonna like the outcome, and so that was a forcing function. I think the challenge with this how to rule the world, masters of the universe mentality as it's applied in Silicon Valley today is that no one believes that they believe they are God. They don't believe in anything higher than them, and they don't feel any sense of accountability in large. Now, obviously, there's exceptions, but the general ethos is you are God. You're creating a God. You're creating AI as this new God that you're going to be a master of. I mean, you would be shocked, I think, if you spent a lot of time in the scene and it's got just how strong a sense of sort of absolute infallibility a lot of these people have.
Right.
Yeah. Well, so that then begs the question. You're literally, well, not literally. You're metaphorically, figuratively in bed with these people. How do you meter or try to offset that tendency? Because judging by your critique, you feel the necessity to, which I certainly agree with. By the same token, understanding how institutional dynamics can be and how funding relationships can be, and just generally like how difficult social dynamics can be. How do you manage that?
Yeah, look, I think a lot of people, when you're not a part of the scene, you can sort of fall prey to the tendency to sort of think that everybody on the inside of the scene has the same exact perspective or is in support of what the scene in general is promoting. And in reality, it's a lot more messy. And there's usually something resembling a civil war, some sort of a struggle for influence and power that's happening within these things. And I think that's what's happening in Silicon Valley. I do think there are people like Sam, there are people like Joe Lonsdale, people like me, who deeply, deeply care about trying to solve the most important problems facing society, and who understand that if we don't, then it's going to get really weird and really bad very quickly. And then there's the other people in Silicon Valley who think, who have this sort of God complex and think that, no matter what, they're right, and everyone's going to have to just, eat cake and be happy. And I think that my whole view of being in bed or being a part of the scene is to try and help the first group win, and to try and help the people who actually want to do good things for this country at scale win. And that's why I'm focused on education. And I think there's a lot of people who are trying to build new solutions in healthcare. And I think there's a lot of folks who are really trying to use the massive amount of capital and energy and technological power that Silicon Valley has for good, but a lot of other people just want to make more wealth and consolidate more power. So it's a power struggle, and I think I think that the sort of temptation to just say throw it all away is always going to be there. But I think the much more effective approach is like, how do we help the good guys win the power struggle?
Well, that is all very interesting. And I mean, you're right. Like, there are many different ways that one who is, say, working with and in tech could be approaching, or like startup Silicon Valley, whatever you want to call it, can be sort of approaching it. And like to be championing education and to be making it more egalitarian, democratized in a way that, say, like the government isn't doing, or at least isn't doing at the scale that it used to, is amazing. And, it does sort of speak to, and this was one of the items I want to talk about, was, simultaneously on one hand, the booing at graduations, which are geared at AI and some other sort of backing of power structures that feel a little bit out of touch with students. But also to the idea, I know, Ben, you've mentioned this previously, is that like that conversation is basically like, kind of giving a middle finger to students at their last day. It's like, what was it all for? It's not going to be for anything because this is all here, which is like a really fucked up thing to say. But then on the other hand, it also plays into like, Pope Leo's encyclical last week, and specifically about this sort of like transhumanist everything, which was like kind of wild that he drilled in so deeply on certain people with his stuff. But like that, to what you said, is that like there is a vision for a lot of people who are in power and who are, say, in tech, to sort of not see the ramifications of what they're doing and to be disinterested in the lives of real people and little people, especially people who are just starting out. So this does, like, this whole conversation and things like this really do sort of counterbalance that, hopefully, and like ideally, like it does play out exactly like you're saying, and people are doing very varied things with this education, and they're having more and more access to undo a lot of these sort of things that people aren't caring for, a la entry-level workers, the students, the people who need these pathways. Ben, you're going to say something.
Well, I wanted to pivot a little bit, because to be honest, Tade, the thing you said about letting people eat cake reminded me of a sort of a very key scene in the movie The Backrooms, sorry, which came out over the weekend, which I saw over the weekend. So this is the film directed by Kane. Is it Kane Foster? Something like that.
Kane
anyway,
something.
Sorry. Yeah, Kane something. Anyway, 20-year-old director, based off of the creepypasta meme of The Backrooms, which started in 2019-ish, something like that, became a web series that Kane directed. Did $81 million domestically and over $100 million internationally in its first weekend.
Huge.
Massive thing on a budget of $10 million. So minting money for A24 and generally speaking. And this is a person who is using the method and the memes of current contemporary internet culture to turn a sort of an abstract concept online into this massive box office juggernaut. The reason I bring it up is because I'm wondering to what extent you are focused on the new way to do things being the wrong way to do things before, if that makes sense. In other words, like you would never have done it that way 20 years ago, but now you probably shouldn't do it any other way.
Right.
And I wonder to what extent the dialogue within campus like reflects that dynamic.
Really quickly, I just have to say, like, it's that is very interesting, like that this is done quote unquote the wrong way. When in reality, like, not when in reality, but I remember being, say, working in Hollywood 10 years ago, and no one gave a shit about anything anybody did on YouTube. They didn't take it seriously.
Yep.
People were fighting against that ceiling to get in. And now when it's profitable and when they're like, oh, we're dying, they're sort of getting into that. That's really interesting, is that it's like, oh, actually, we were wrong. YouTube isn't eating our lunch. We are going to work together. And it's like, no. And like, so that's something that I think, like, a bit of history that I think is really funny.
Fixing our lunch.
Anyway.
If you look at all these threads, there's just like a common thread, which is like, there are these transitions in society from time to time. This is obviously a big one, akin to the Industrial Revolution. And I think, the internet one, what you're basically saying is like the internet one, which is like a miniature version of what's going to happen with AI, is sort of like, first they fought it, then eventually they lost, and then now they're embracing it, and they're realizing actually that there's a new way to do the same things, and that there were inefficiencies, and there were all manner of just like really stupid, unfair norms in the old way, gatekeeping, who gets to make a film, who gets to. Right. So I do think again that there is always this positive way that these technologies can proliferate that doesn't have to neglect and harm a bunch of the little guys, the college graduates, the lower income, the people who are always forgotten. And so I think that's a perfect example. Internally, it's literally a perennial struggle, because higher education is one of the least dynamic, generally one of the least innovative sort of set of institutions we have anywhere in the world. And so, helping people understand that getting to the next version, let's call it V2.0 of higher education, is existential,
right?
Both for the survival of individual institutions, but also for the sort of general perception of the class in the conception of most of Americans. So this is an existential thing, and so constantly we're trying to figure out how to do new things based on first principles. I'll give you an example. if you remember being in college, there was an ad drop period, right? And after which you can't change your classes. Now, okay, we have technology today such that we're capable. If Ben is in, calculus 1, which is at 9 a.m. with Professor Kyle.
Never made it, but yeah, got it. Keep going.
6 weeks into the term, I could press a button and move all of your data from calculus 1 with Professor Kyle to calculus 1 at 4 p.m. with Professor Tade. And your grade translates over and everything happens instantly. Now, we know that a lot of students drop out, particularly at the 2-year level, because their life changes. They're always, for the most part, 80+% of them are working while they're in school. They get a new job because it's going to pay them more, but then they have to change their class schedule past the ad drop. That's one of the biggest off-ramps from community colleges' graduation rates. That's why the graduation rate is 27%. But most colleges are like, nope, the ad drop is the ad drop. And you talk to faculty, they're like, well, you can't just change into my class halfway through the term. I wouldn't even recognize it. It's like, what are we here to do? Our North Star is graduation rates and outcomes. So we're going to build that feature, and we have that feature, and we're going to support. If Kyle needs to change his class 6 weeks into the term, or Ben, we're going to do it. So I think even just framing the mentality of what are we really here to do? What is our North Star? Remembering what that North Star is and coming back to that is kind of the only way to operate through these moments of massive change. And I'd hope that A24 or whatever studio is like, what are we here to do? We're here to create great fucking art. If it's on YouTube, if it's on TikTok, if it's in a movie theater, if it's on film, if it's digital, we're here to create great fucking art. And it's the same thing, I'll end with this, that a lot of these Silicon Valley guys miss. Like, what are we here to do?
Right.
Are we here to make money? Because that's the Wall Street guys. We're here to help humanity thrive, to build technology that helps humanity thrive. That's the only reason Silicon Valley should exist. And so when if you can remember that, then you can use that as a North Star, and then you could be thoughtful and say, okay, yes, we know that AI is going to have massive benefits 10 years or 20 years from now. We might, accelerate the discovery of a cure for cancer by 5 years. Think about how many millions of lives that would save. But we also don't want to create human suffering now. And so we're going to make sure that even as this transition takes place, we help people figure out how to get reskilled so they don't have, decimation. We don't have wholly decimated cities, just like we did with Detroit with offshoring, or Pittsburgh with offshoring of steel manufacturing. We want to be able to make sure that there is no, massive pain, because our job is to help human flourishing. So anyway, sometimes the scene can become a bubble and these guys don't hear it, but we want the right people to listen in.
So following on that though, I have a question. You obviously are effective as a vehicle for this message, right? Like you've raised money, you've achieved a level of visibility, you found partners that are powerful and well known, you've appeared on hip replacement, you've done all of these things. Yeah,
you did it. Now the world is your oyster.
So I think there is a strong likelihood that you could have taken a different tack to push the same message. Like there is an argument that you could have, instead of saying, let's create an alt college startup, let's form a lobbying group and go to education institutions and say, the rigidity around ad drop is ridiculous and is pushing people out of the system. Change it. Why do this as a private enterprise? What's the like incremental value of that versus just being very effective operating through existing systems?
I just don't want to kill myself. I think
okay,
fair.
Trying to convince colleges who've done things. I mean, Harvard's older than the United States of America. We turned 250 this year. Harvard turned 250 a few decades ago. Like, I have no interest in trying to change these ancient, storied institutions. And you kind of already gave the answer, Ben. You sort of, I've made it to the top. I'm on hip replacement. Now, if I tried to influence those institutions, maybe I might get past the front door. But when I started campus, I was just some kid just some guy in Silicon Valley. We turned 10 this year. I was just some 23-year-old guy who was intellectually arrogant and naively thought if he built better software, he could transform higher education. So maybe I should shut it all down, and go and lobby, now that, again, I've made it to the mountaintop. But no, I sort of, I'm sort of joking. Like a high level,
Yeah,
I
yeah, of
think
course.
I think the reality is systems are the way they are because a lot of people benefit from them being that way. And so, all it's not like there's not a lot of smart people in higher education who haven't realized that the ad drop problem was hurting a lot of students. Like, that's just not how it works. Like, they figured these are really smart people, right? They figured out. Same thing with Silicon Valley. It's not like they don't know. These people know. These are really smart people. But a lot of people benefit from things being the way that they are. And so the only real way, I think, to disrupt and actually get to the V2 or V3 of these systems, is to have a really clear, sort of petri dish modeling of what the future could look like, right?
Sure.
And so the only real way to do that is to be campus. Again, I actually did what you were suggesting. I started Campus Wire. We started off as Campus Wire just to build basically Riverside plus Slack for online college classes. That was my whole thing. Oh, if we build really great live online learning experiences, we're going to transform everything. I had this whole model of how, I mean, we can get into the weeds. I wrote a whole white paper about it, but like, there's way too many institutions. And if you look at the Brits, the only, sort of comparable higher education system to ours in America in terms of, tier one research institutions, tier one job training, at scale, the Brits have 200 universities teaching 2 million people. We have 4,000 universities teaching 20 million people. So we're half as efficient as the Brits, okay?
Right.
We have twice as many institutions relative to students. And each institution is a provost of this, a dean of that. And so if you look at the salary, just like the balance sheet, that we're spending on double the administrative overhead of what the British are doing.
Sure.
And so that's one of the reasons that our higher education costs have ballooned so much in America. It's like, there's all these like obvious things that if you look at it, you can try and fix, but nobody's going to let you come and fix it because people are benefiting, because all those, there's all these reasons that the status quo is what it is. And so anyway, for me, the thing I learned in 2020 was, okay, it was a shake and bake moment, COVID. And everyone realized that higher education was sort of deeply insecure in that if the classrooms are closed, people can't learn. And so that was this huge moment for me to be like, okay, now is the time for actually a new model of a new institution to be created. And then I think mimetic reference is how these institutions evolve. Basically, everyone is trying to copy Harvard. And now there's a new model that a lot of institutions should try. Like if you're NYU or you're Vanderbilt, you should keep trying to be Harvard. Like that's the best way to do what you're doing. But if you're, a random community college in Fresno, you should not be trying to copy Harvard with all these deans and provosts and this and that.
Sure.
You should, and your ad drop periods, you should be doing what we're doing. And so we're trying to build a new model that hopefully others can now observe and then adapt.
I've got it. And then do you, sorry, Kyle, just very quickly, do you then provide them with the software and the technical means to do that? Is that that's
an internal dialogue that we're having. My view is yes. Our mission is to maximize access to world-class education. We can't teach everybody ourselves. We need our other community colleges to get better. And so, my hope is absolutely yes. We can build and release all of the tools that we're using, and we can do it for free. This isn't about making money, to help the other institutions perform much better. At the same time, in terms of when, distraction is a precursor of death. So we have to be focused on running one institution really freaking well. And then at some point, yes, I wholly believe that the right thing for us to do is to take our template and make it as repeatable as possible at other institutions, again, for free or at break even or whatever cost. It's not about profit. It's about helping other people adapt.
Yeah. What I was going to say is that it started with COVID, and for better or worse, AI is getting us here. It's like, this is the moment, is a make or break moment for many, many industries. Like many industries are like,
Same time.
smoke and mirrors are making it feel like everything is fine, don't worry about us, but like things are about to fall apart. Like Hollywood is a really good
Sky's
example of
falling.
this. Yeah, Hollywood example of this. Museums, fashion, like a lot of political parties, let's say, or branches of politics, even like marketing agencies, things like that. Like they are
Yeah.
fighting for their life, and they don't want you to know that. And I think schools are one of the biggest examples, obviously, both because of AI. We've seen this very, very well, but also COVID as well. And like it is exactly to what you said. Like if they're not adapting, like they are going to see people unplugging. Private schools, or not private schools, small private schools are closing across the country. Like
Yep.
people are seeing like drops in enrollment. Like it's very real shit, and it's because like they didn't pivot quick enough. And like, will they? Do they need to? I don't know. And I think the same thing is true of Hollywood. The same thing is going to be true for fashion. Like these are the things where it's like, what happens when you say gatekeep too much and you don't elevate younger people and younger thought and new systems. That is what sort of like can happen. And like, it sort of
Yeah.
speaks to what we talk about, is like that need for intergenerational dialogue. And like when you don't have
Absolutely.
that, things start to crumble.
Well, okay, so then
100%.
Tade, in that question, or so to that end, right? And I think you're right when you say nothing great comes out. It doesn't come out of a scene or a community or something like that. Who do you look at and say, okay, this system approximates, or this university approximates, or this community approximates the sort of thrust of what we're doing, and so we see them as
Well, I mean, it's like I think we're a part of multiple scenes. I'm a part of the Silicon Valley scene, but I'm also part of the higher education scene. And so I think the big thing that was missing was that bridge. The Silicon Valley people don't understand that higher education was not completely wrong in everything they were doing. They're not
yeah.
sort of the antichrist where they just take the cross and invert it. Like that's not higher education. They had some things that they were doing really freaking well. America still has, in my opinion, the number one and inarguably number one or number two higher education system on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so still doing a lot right, but then there's some things that were completely broken that need to get fixed, and vice versa. Higher education didn't understand that technology was not optional. I think for a long time,
Right.
like learning how to teach online was like this. Do we really think that education should happen online? Like for decades, most universities just thought of it as like almost like an option, like this joke, this nice little toy. And it wasn't until COVID, as Kyle mentioned, that institutions were like, oh, actually, no, that's just like a fundamental competency that we have to develop. And so I think the bridge is the thing, like getting people. Kyle was alluding to intergenerational bridge, but I think there's also scene bridge. There probably needs to be a little bit more of a bridge from the Hollywood scene to the Silicon Valley. Like all of these different groups have to interact a little bit more if we're going to build the future together, and if that future is going to be a future we want to live in. And I think in terms of sort of who do you look to, there are a handful in higher education who recognize this. I think probably number one is Michael Crow. He's the president of Arizona State University. He figured out a long time ago that the old state school model, where again everyone is trying to replicate the Harvard model, just wasn't right. It just doesn't make sense. You're a huge land grant institution. You have all of these unique advantages by being a state institution. Why are you trying to copy an elite private? Right? It doesn't really make sense. And so he figured that out quickly, and he took ASU's enrollment from 30,000 students to over 100,000 students, and made his balance sheet sing like a children's choir, and it's just been a great thing for everybody. And his brand is much more relevant, and his ranking in the U.S. News and World Report has climbed, and his balance sheet's really strong, and he's actually at the frontier of what a new state institution could be like. I think UCF. Yeah.
The idea so I'm 50, the idea that ASU would be mentioned in a list of top colleges at all in my lifetime was
right.
incomprehensible.
Crazy. Right.
Right. Literally crazy. And so, yeah, look, I think it's funny. It's like my son goes to Elon in North Carolina, which is a school that when I was in college I'd never heard of, right? Many people my age who have kids who haven't gone through the college process aren't aware of it. Everybody that I know under 35 is like, oh, I have a friend there, or oh, that's a great store I went to. So these sorts of changes are possible. The
Absolutely.
trajectory can shift, and I think it's for me the interesting thing about all of this is like, how do we figure out how to make the journey to and through college less what's the word? Monolithic. What's monolithic? How do we make it less monolithic? How do we make it less arduous? How do we make it less, if not less expensive, then certainly easier to manage the expense of? And so anyway, I'm always interested to know who the shining lights in that space are, because it's not easy to see, even as I have a daughter actively researching colleges right now. And, there's a lot of identikit sort of messaging out there. So
yeah, I just want to say university is definitely at the top of the list. I think University of Central Florida is coming up. University of UW Madison. If you're a Pell student going to UW Madison, if you're in state, you're taking like $1,000 a year in debt. That's it. Like, we're talking like these are amazing value propositions for students, and so if every state university just copied those three, it's like, I mean, the whole system would be operating on a much higher level.
I mean, there is a world where, like, I mean, this is exactly it. Like, there is a world where, like, the system flips. Like, if we're getting there, if like people are like, college is too expensive, I don't want to do it, and or I'm going to go into trades, I'm going to go into vocational, I'm going to do something that's going to cost more. Like, that is the opportunity for community colleges. I think, like, especially in LA, and I'm sure there's some in New York too. Maybe you have some, Ben. I don't know because I didn't live there. But living in LA, like Santa Monica Community College and Pasadena Community College are huge. Like, they're so respected. They do such a good job of preparing students to go to other universities or to work in the city. Like, they were so reputable and like hyper localized, obviously, but like they were just like institutions alongside like CalArts and Caltech. Like, they were just as relevant and
Miami-Dade in Florida, Dallas College in obviously Texas, LaGuardia College here in New York. I mean, there are, if you kind of look at what the top 5 to 10% of what institutions are doing, you kind of just see what the whole thing could look like if everybody could replicate it. The problem is everyone can't, because you're going to have to, and I don't want to be brutalist, but you're going to have to reduce the number of institutions. There's just too much administrative overhead to serve the number of students we have, as I've already illustrated by sort of juxtaposing against the UK. So high level, systems generally aren't going to change themselves. Someone has to like develop a new model and show how they can be done better, and then over time, I think people will replicate the model, and that's what we're trying to do with campus.
So, Tade, I have to say we're coming to the close of the episode, and it's been really fascinating talking to you about this. I have to confess, one of my concerns when we started out was like we were going to get the campus pitch the whole time, and I greatly appreciate the fact that we haven't, and that you've been engaged in like I would say pretty heterodox dialogue with us. That doesn't answer the one question that we always end up getting to with our guests, though, which is like, all right, so outside of this, what else do you keep busy with? Like, what else are you paying attention to? What like lights your lights outside of making
off campus?
Yeah, see,
that's what we need.
He thought I was the dad on the pod.
Hey, someone had to take the pun.
Unfortunately, my life is very sort of monotonously sort of concentrated on campus. I don't really have much of a life outside of campus. It's I joked that it was exhausting. It actually is exhausting, but at the same time, I keep referencing shake and bake. My father came from Nigeria, and he, in Nigeria, the first 2 years of college is for engineering. It's all the same, whether you do civil, chemical, whatever. And so he did the first 2 years there, and then transferred here in New York, and was trying to decide between architecture and I think computer science in the late '80s, like '89. and he chose architecture right as America stopped building towers, and right as the computer revolution, the personal computing revolution was about to take off, and so he sort of regretted that choice for sort of like his entire career, and yeah, he tells his son, hey, there are these moments in life, there's these shake and bake moments where 2 years, if you play those 2 years right, everything else for the next 2 decades just falls into place. And if you get them wrong, you'll spend the next 2 decades like just slaving away, pushing this ball up a hill because you made it wrong during the shake and bake. And so he called me during COVID and was like, son, this is a shake and bake moment for Campus Wire. And I remember thinking, oh, holy crap. And then I just played it out. You wouldn't believe it. Like UCLA wanted to give me like $4 million for Campus Wire because they didn't have any Zoom or Riverside type thing for online learning. And I remember thinking, this is not going to last. UCLA it's a dating app. It's a minor league sports team. It's a friend finder. It's all these things. They're not going to stay online. And next year, they're not going to pay me $4 million again for this when only 10% of the kids are going to use it. And I said, we're giving it away for free. And we're going to go and buy a community college. And that will stay online because I think community college is not a dating app. It doesn't have all those frats and sororities and all these social dynamic sports. It should be online. And that was right. And so that was a shake and bake moment. And I had to make this big sacrifice to turn off this revenue thing. And I also knew it was going to be super competitive. Microsoft Teams, Google Classroom, Zoom. It was going to be a red ocean. And I feel like this is another one of those moments. It might even be a bigger shake and bake moment. And so this is my long way of saying, because everything is shaking and baking so intensely right now,
right,
I don't really have time for almost anything else in life other than trying to respond to this shake and bake right now.
I mean, that's a classic entrepreneur situation, or like, yeah, that understandable. But thankfully, it's like, I would assume in the world of higher education, you're at least around a lot of interesting conversations and learning in the process. So you are getting the best of everything in a way. I would hope. If I
love it. Right, yeah, like right now, I'm waking up early, going to sleep late, and it feels. I'm 33 now. It's just on my birthday last week, but it feels like I'm 23 again, and it's a really exciting time. But anyway, if I was going to spend time on something not this, it would be what the hell Steven Spielberg's trying to do with this disclosure thing. And I don't know if you saw the documentary Age of Disclosure, and the government keeps teasing us with these UAP hearings. Like, what is going on? So that would be my my guilty pleasure if I wasn't completely locked in on getting through this shake and bake moment.
Okay, extraterrestrial wormhole. I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, speaking of important junctures, Campbell's UK passport just showed up.
Oh, wow.
So,
good for him. Good for y'all. Good for everybody.
There we go. Finally. Tade, this has been really fun. And keen to see where you take campus, keen to figure out how, listeners of hip replacement can find out more about it or get involved or poke holes or whatever they choose to do, right? They're a pretty, free-willed and heterodox bunch. Where do they find you? How do they track you down? What's the best way to reach you?
Campus.edu. And I referenced Burning Man earlier. My team's going to kill me when they hear that. You don't have to be a burner to come to campus. We want to.
Good. Because we're pro Senius, but not necessarily pro Burning Man.
Exactly. Exactly.
But I mean, look, I think the future, if there's one thing that's clear, if just to make a prediction so that maybe I can be humble 5 years from now when I listen to this recording, I do think that one thing is already clear is that the education is becoming the new gym membership. I think if you're going to stay current, if you're going to stay up to date, if you're going to improve your productivity anywhere close to the rate of AI, it's going to be a 1 to 2 hour a week commitment to just spend time in structured learning. And I think that's kind of this beautiful, to end on a high note, optimistic view of the future is like we stop seeing learning and college and higher education as this like once in a lifetime thing, and it becomes like, yeah, it's going to be very intense for a few years after high school, but then it's always going to be with you, and you're always going to have that joy of learning. Right. And I think that's like a
No, I like, and as a way to stop, I like that because it is a reaffirmation of the idea of liberal arts education without necessarily the specification around the liberal arts per se. So
exactly,
adapting with the times, which is what it needs.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you for tuning in. Tade, this has been really fun. Campus EDU is the place to find you. And in the meantime, look to the skies for further inspiration.
As I say.
I like that. Thanks, guys.
All right, guys. Bye.
Bye.